اوكي. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما انك انت العليم الحكيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم اجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh, everyone. Again, sorry for the slight delay tonight, but alhamdulillah. So today, inshallah, we're going to look at. I'm aiming to start from page 17 and maybe as far as page 25. We'll see, but. Just to recap, so we're doing Pinnacle Papers Volume 4, to every young woman who believes in Allah, by Imam Muhammad al-Buti, rahimahullah. And as we've been going over in the past few sessions, we're talking about how the enemies of Islam are working towards undermining Islam. And he uses the word again on page 17, a word that we have discussed many times, al-Ghazw al-Fikri, al-Ghazw al-Fikri, which, yes, can be translated, and as I did it here, the ideological attack. But I also like to think of it as ideological subversion because it's subversive. It presents itself as trying to help. This is how the enemies of Islam that come from the West, they present themselves as trying to be helpful, as trying to make things easier for us, as trying to better us, or trying to lift us out of our backwardness and all that kind of stuff. But really, it's a cloaked dagger, right? Really, it is an attempt to undermine the Muslims and undermine Islam. So, and as I was talking about recently on a podcast, and it's in the latest book that we just published with Nawabooks, The Etiquette of Dialogue in Allah's book, there's a part 2 called Preserving the Arabic Language and its Literature, which again is another aspect of this ideological subversion, which is trying to make Muslims think that, oh, your Arabic is so difficult, your grammar is so difficult, writing it is so difficult. You need to think of new methods. Let us help you, right? And it sounds all nice on the surface, but no, what are they trying to do? They're trying to put a wedge between the Muslims and the Arabic language. Because if they can put a wedge between the Muslims and the Arabic language, they put a wedge between the Muslims and Allah, right? Or the Muslims and the Quran, and by extension, educating the Muslims in Allah, right? So it's the same games. So he says, Imam Al-Buti on page 17, so well, how do the leaders of this ideological attack, how do they use the element of the woman as a means to achieve their goal, right? As a means to achieve their goal of undermining Islam and the Muslims. And he says in brief, the short answer is to take an opposing stance to every ruling that Islam has about women. Just take the opposing stance, right? So if Allah's ruling is that Muslims should cover, they say no, they need to uncover. If Allah's ruling is that women should strive to be good wives or good mothers, it's all no, they got to be career women, right? It's trying to stop them at every single angle, every single post. So he says, for example, since Islam has decreed that the woman be protected and covered and that she not display any of her charms to foreign men, these people work to remove her as far as possible from the quote-unquote fetters of protection and covering. Push her as far away as possible towards exposing her charms and wherever she may be, right? Whether it's gatherings in the marketplaces and shopping malls, wherever it is. So to achieve this, they sought the assistance of every hypocrite who has a silver tongue. Right, because again, they're gonna try to use people. This another aspect again that Imam Al-Buti brings up is that they will try to find willing agents amongst the Muslims, right? And this is something we have to bear in mind, which is that the unbelievers, they can't really achieve anything. They can't really achieve anything inside the Muslim community, against the Muslim community, unless they have collaborators inside the Muslim community. This is the sad fact of it, right? There has to be a traitor or a collaborator. And when we think back to the bigger picture of why is the love of Allah so important? Why is the love of Allah so important, right? As a Muslim, the love of Allah is so important, not only because it makes your actions sincere, it makes your words sincere, but on top of that, it protects you. It protects you. People allow themselves to become traitors and collaborators with the enemies because of a weakness, because they want the dunya, they want money, they want power, they want influence, they want some position. And that's how the enemies of Islam use them. They say, hey, look at this guy. We think that this guy could be bought off. We think that this guy could be bribed into doing something for us. We think that this guy, we could entice him.
with some money. We can entice him if we get him a nice car or a nice house somewhere. He'll do our bidding and he'll help us, right? Because why else? Because think about it, Muslims aren't going to listen to some guy who's not a Muslim. They're going to listen to some kafir say, yeah, yeah, you should take your hijab off. Yeah, yeah, you should take your abaya off, right? Yes, you should cover more. Then why would they listen to that, right? But if they can bribe a Muslim to say these kinds of things, if they can entice a Muslim to say these kinds of things, right? Especially if he has some type of authority or influence, like here we go, right? Paying influencers sounds familiar, right? It's an old tactic. It's an old tactic. So they find hypocrites to do these kinds of things. So because Islam has decreed that the Muslim not adorn herself, the way Muslim women were known to adorn themselves in the age of Jahiliyyah, that she remain in her home and exert the utmost effort towards producing a righteous family and raising good children. Okay, because this is what we want. We want to have stable two-parent households, and we want to have the mother. Like I was recently doing this with my Arabic classes. We were reading a dialogue in our B2 Arabic book, right? That al-ummu al-madrasatul ula, right? The mother is the first school, right? How important the role of the mother is. The fact that the children, they spend the bulk of their time in the early years with the mother, right? Like they will be, by and large, in most cases, they will be a reflection of their mother's character, of their mother's nature. It's going to come out in their children. So so because Islam promotes this, they promote the idea that a woman should not remain at home, that she should go out and work and bear the various tasks of life and so forth, and that she's not able to raise people at home. Now, I'm going to mention this man a couple times in this lesson. There's now to back this up. I recommend people go on YouTube when you have some time. Go on YouTube and look up a man called Aaron Russo. There's a man called Aaron Russo, Aaron Russo, Russo. Now he died, I think, in 2006 or 2007 of cancer. He was a film producer. He was a Hollywood film producer. He worked with some big names in Hollywood like Eddie Murphy and so forth. And he ran for governor of Nevada. He ran to be the governor of Nevada. I think at some point in the 1990s. Now, he was interviewed. He did an interview not long before he died. I think around like 2005 or 2006. He did an interview. And he basically explained what happened when he was running for governor of Nevada. Now, when he was running for governor of Nevada, right, which means he had some type of, relatively significant political position, certain quote unquote powerful people in the world tried to recruit him. Some powerful people in the United States tried to recruit him to their side. And he met one of the Rockefellers, Nicholas Rockefeller. And Nicholas Rockefeller invited him to his house, and Nicholas Rockefeller uh, exposed quite a few things, let him in on a few things. And he said to Aaron Russo, this is what Aaron Russo says in the story. Aaron Russo says this man he invites me to his house, and he sits me down, and we're having like a meal or coffee or whatever. And he says to me, he says to me, what do you think the women's liberation movement was all about? The whole women's lib movement, okay, which happened back in the 1960s, 1970s. What do you think that was all about, right? And Aaron Russo says, well, I thought it was all about, equal rights and equal pay and women achieve the same rights that men have and blah, blah, blah. And, and Nicholas Rockefeller sort of looks at him and says, you idiot. You simpleton. And Russo's like, well, why am I an idiot? Why am I a simpleton? And he says, who do you think funded that? He said, we funded that, right? The Rockefeller Foundation. We funded that whole thing, right? There's that lady, I think her name's like Gloria Steinberg, like she was a well-known CIA asset, right? We funded that, and the purpose was, right? Remember, this guy's supposedly a private citizen, but he's talking as if he's the government. He says we wanted that because we wanted more women working, which means more taxes. We wanted more women working, which means more tax revenue, and we wanted to get the kids away from their parents earlier. We wanted to get the kids away from their parents earlier so that they can go into the government schooling system earlier and they can be indoctrinated from an earlier age. That's why we did it. That's the whole reason why we did it. So more women working, which means higher taxes. We have more tax-paying citizens because more women are working. And on top of that, we're getting the kids away from their parents from a much earlier age so that they can go into the government school systems and they can be indoctrinated from an earlier age. Okay, so this isn't right. This isn't make believe, right? And Imam al-Buti is hitting the nail on the head here, right? So they raise that that's how they attack it. They say, oh, she should be contributing to society. She should be earning her worth. Yeah, because so that you can exploit her and you can brainwash the kids. That's why. So they started attacking this thing about the backwardness, right? So that's what next thing Mom said. They start saying it's this backwardness. What Muslims need to do is they need to manufacture, right? And this is because we have two books in the pipeline, by the way. Alhamdulillah, at Nawabooks, we have two books in the pipeline. One is Pinnacle Papers Volume 7, which is being edited right now. That is going to cover the issue of qadr, right? And there's a beautiful discussion in there by Imam al-Buti about science and religion, and relation to science and religion. That's coming up. But then after that, which is the current work I'm doing, which is Pinnacle Papers Volume 8, which is who is responsible for the backwardness of the Muslims? Who is responsible for the backwardness of the Muslims? And one of the points he makes, because as we go through this, they try to this angle, they try to say, oh, you need to secularize, right? You need to, in order to advance, you need to secularize. And it's like, hold on a second. If you look at you just study like the history of civilizations, like major civilizations and empires, right? Like the Romans, right? Or the Greeks, or the Chinese empires, or the ancient Egyptians, right? They achieved great things, and they had religion as a part of it, right? Religion was, even though it was false, it was paganism, it was idolatry. Religion was a huge part of it, and religion was a huge moral check. It was a huge moral check on the people, right? When the moral check went away, the quote unquote moral checks and balances, when the moral checks and balances faded away, the empire faded away, right? This is just well known about the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire was collapsing, its morals were collapsing. It was becoming a completely immoral society. People were involved in all kinds of debauchery. The family was breaking down, all kinds of horrible things, right? But again, you look at ancient Egypt, right? They have all these shirky beliefs about Pharaoh, right? Him being a lord, him being a god, him being this and that. All these shirky beliefs, but that 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 religion that religion they had doesn't stand in the way of their material progress, right? So one of the points Imam al-Buti makes in Pinnacle Papers Volume 8 is he says so all these false religions were never a barrier to the progress of those civilizations or to the advance of those civilizations. But Islam, the true religion, that is going to be a problem, is it? That is going to be a barrier to advancement. That is going to be a barrier to advancement and progress. Like how do you make that logical? How? It doesn't make any sense. So Imam al says this is an old stratagem. It's old and exposed, this strategy, right? Of trying to say, because it says here that the Muslims, what they need to do is they need to manufacture, right? Muslims, they need to advance, they need to manufacture, right? And so it's purely looking at this idea as if it's an immaterial thing. We just need to make more things. We just need to make more things, right? And again, like Aaron Russo was explaining, no, if you think it's all about manufacturing, no, it's about getting more people working, and therefore it's just more taxation. And again, you're breaking up the family, you're getting the mothers away from the kids. It has nothing to do with that. And one of the things that's discussed by Imam al-Buti in another book, which we've translated, Minhaj al-Hadara al-Insaniya fi al-Quran, right? The approach to human civilization in the Quran is that this doesn't help the Arab world. Like when you have countries, when you have countries like you look at the Arab world now, you look at countries like Egypt, for example. Every like almost everyone you meet is either an engineer or a pharmacist. But what has that actually done, right? Like the core driving force under it all is a moral force. It's a moral force, right? Even here's the thing, even if it's being pushed by a false religion, even if it's motivated by a false religion, when you have a moral force that's keeping people in check, that's keeping people balanced, that's keeping people doing more or less the right thing, you can see success. But if you just purely have quote unquote loads of engineers and you have loads of doctors and you have loads of pharmacists, that's not going to do anything. Because what if they're corrupt? What if they're just greedy? What if they're just selfish and so forth? So this is the next thing they did. They said, we want to make sure there are just as many. They tried to tell the Muslim world, these unbelievers, you need to have just as many women working as men. You need to have just as many women working as men. Again, this is back to what Aaron Russo was warning about, right? get all the women in the workforce. So this, and he says, and then there are people who then try to change the revealed law. They try to change the revealed law, and then they treat, and again, so this go back to, so then Imam goes back to the point of how the unbelievers are going to use collaborators and traitors within the ranks of the Muslims to achieve this, right? People who are willing to change or attempt to change the revealed law of Allah, or change the fiqh for a worldly benefit. And it's worth mentioning here that Imam Sha'arawi, Bismillah, Imam Sha'arawi, rahimahullah, made a beautiful point in his Tafsir Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 185, where Allah describes the Quran as a huda, as a guidance. And the point being that the difference between Islam and what Allah has legislated, and between all these other political and social and economic systems, right? Whether you have communism or capitalism or socialism or libertarianism or what have you. It's not just the fact that they're man-made laws versus revelatory law. You also have to look deeper and consider that when a law legislates, there's nothing in it for him, right? When a law legislates, there's nothing in it for him. A law is perfect. How a law is not going to benefit from what he legislates. There's nothing in it for him. He has no stake in the outcome, so to speak, right? Whereas all these other man-made laws, not only are they deficient, because the people writing them, the people inventing these systems, they don't have Allah's knowledge. So they don't have Allah's knowledge of the future. They don't have Allah's knowledge of human nature. They don't have Allah's knowledge of the past. They don't have Allah's knowledge of future events. Not only do they have that issue, is that every single one of these man-made systems is designed to benefit a certain group of people, right? Whether it's capitalism or socialism, again, communism, libertarian, whatever it is, all these systems, they're all designed to benefit a certain group or class of people, because that's how human beings think, right? Whereas when Allah legislates, no, it's for everyone's benefit. It's for humans' benefit, for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of humanity. And he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously has no way to benefit from this because he's perfect. So what they did is they were to then lead people astray and get these people to think, and get a lot of Muslims to think that, yeah, this is what we need to do. We need to get rid of these veils because they're backward, they're holding us back, and we need to get into manufacturing, right? So he says this is the problem, right? This is the problem. And again, similar to what we were saying about Arabic, similar to what we were saying about the Arabic language, is this is what they do. It's like problem, reaction, solution, right? The Hegelian dialectic, as it's known, right? Is they try to present to us as if we have a problem. And it's like, well, do we really have a problem? Again, it's like the Arabic language. Do we have this problem in the sense that, oh, the Arabic is really difficult? Do we have this problem, right? That oh no, it's so terrible that the men work and the women take care of the kids at home. Is it really a problem? No, they make it look like a problem, and then they offer their satanic solution. So what he wants to do then is he wants to go into the ruling. He says, let's talk about the ruling of women. Let's talk about the ruling of women's covering. Let's talk about the ruling of women working and studying. Let's talk about this. And let's do this in the most objective way possible. And then he says, let's look at the outcomes as well. Let's discover the beneficial outcomes. Because if we look at the beneficial outcomes of Allah's rulings, that will, of course, give us more faith and certainty. Will give us more faith and certainty. Likewise, if we were to discover harmful outcomes, pretending or assume that would happen, that would allow us to look at the matter properly and employ ijtihad, right? Because the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "La darar wa la dirar." There's no harm and no reciprocating of harm, because of course, within our legal system, we have the principle of darura and haja. We have the principle of absolute necessity or emergency and need, right? That in certain cases where it is not possible to follow the law of Allah, we change it, right? Case in point, Dorora and Haja. Just to give you guys a quick summary of Dorora and Haja, right? And I'll quote Imam. I think his name is Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Shatiri. I think that's his name. Or Muhammad Omar al-Shatiri. The book is called Sharh al-Qut al-Nafis. He explained the difference between Dorora and Haja. He says, okay, a woman in her iddah, like she's in her post-marital waiting period after divorce. she's not allowed to leave her house except for dorora or haja. Okay, so haja is going to be something that, if not acted upon, is going to lead to difficulty. It's not going to lead to loss of life or a loss of limb or anything drastic, but it will cause difficulty. So this will be like, okay, she needs to go out maybe to buy food. She needs to go out maybe to work somewhere, right? Note that, right? She might have to go out and buy food and other necessities, or she might have to go out and work, right? So, and if she's prevented from doing that, it's going to cause hardship because there might not be anyone else to provide for her. There might not be anyone else to look after her and so forth. And then dorura is an extreme situation. Dorura would be like the house catches on fire, or a burglar breaks in, or a predatory animal, or something like that, right? That's an emergency, right? That's dorura and haja, right? That exists in our fiqh. That exists, right? We don't have these extreme laws like the children of Israel have, where it's someone could be you're a Jew on the Sabbath, and someone's choking to death next to you, and you say, well, I can't do anything because it's the Sabbath, right? We don't have that. We don't have that twisted understanding of things. So Imam al-Buti then moves on to talk about the ruling of Islam's ruling on these matters of women covering and women working and so forth. And the first thing he does is he says, I seek refuge in a law that I would claim to be talking about Allah's ruling, but then embellish it with my own position, right? I don't want to do that. He says, I seek refuge in a law that I would do that I would say, yeah, this is Islam's ruling, but it's really my ruling, right? Or I take Allah's ruling and then I twist it, or I embellish it, or I distort it in some way to suit my own needs or my own agenda, or what have you. So he says here, if a writer engages in deception, he bears responsibility for whatever sins people commit as a result of that deception, i.e., they rely on the false ruling they are given, in which they were made to think was Allah's ruling. Because this is the really scary thing. This is a scary thing, but it's also a momentous thing. What a faqih does, right? So a true bona fide faqih fully understands what he's doing when he does this. When he fully understands, when he looks at the hardship that someone's in. So someone might come to him and ask for a fatwa, and someone says, okay, what do I do in this situation? I'm in this difficult situation. What is my way out? What the faqih has to do, especially if he has to employ some ijtihad and figure out an answer, is when he comes to the conclusion, he says, okay, fine, it is permissible for you to do this, or what you should do is do this, right? And the questioner complies, right? The questioner complies with that. The full blown meaning of that is what the faqih is essentially saying. What the faqih is essentially saying, or the mufti is essentially saying to the person, is on Yawm al-Qiyamah, if Allah is not happy with what you have done, I will take the blame for it. Like, effectively, I will stand between you and Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah and say it's not his fault, it's mine. Right? I bear the responsibility for this. He asked me the question, I gave him the answer, therefore I'm fully responsible. And this is why a faqih or a mufti or anyone answering a question has to be very careful. Has to be very, very careful, because if that idea, if it's wrong and it spreads and a whole bunch of people start doing it, it's like, whoops, right? Whoops. And that person could be responsible for loads of people having invalid prayers, or loads of people having invalid fasts, or loads of people falling into zina, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a serious thing that a faqih does, and a faqih does that, and if inshallah, if he has the right intention, and he does that out of love for Allah and love for the Messenger of Allah and love for the ummah, love for the common believers, and this is why I'm going to do it, then that's praiseworthy. But on the flip side, and likewise, if you have someone who's doing this deceptively and he's deceiving people, then he's gonna bear the responsibility for that sin, because if he gives an incorrect ruling, and then loads of people, again, act upon that ruling, then he bears responsibility for it. He bears responsibility for it, and he will be taken to task for it, because he's the one who led the people astray. The people can be seen as innocent. They thought, well, no, we just wanted to know whether that was halal or haram. We asked so-and-so, he said it was halal, so we did it. We didn't know, right? So it falls on him. So it says, the writer who believes in Allah on the last day is not safe from bearing the sins of the other people and their consequences. Right. So again, the faqih, the mufti, he has to be very, very careful about how he conducts himself and how he answers questions because he does not want to bear the responsibility of loads of people following the wrong position. Now, the next thing he talks about is he goes into how we have to base when we talk about the Allah and His Messenger. When we talk about the rulings regarding women, we take them from the Quran and the Sunnah. He says on page 22, from the Quran and the Sunnah, from a valid qiyas sahih, a valid analogy, and the consensus made by the imams and scholars of the Muslims, right? Uh, and then he says, of course, and this is an important point he makes. He says, of course, this does not include what we call waqa'i al-ahwal, right? Which are waqa'i al-ahwal, waqada'i al-a'yan, which are exceptional circumstances and notable issues. Okay, so he says we do have examples. We do have examples in the time of the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where people are given unique rulings. People are given unique rulings, but we don't build analogies on that. We don't build rulings off of that, right? So, for example, like when we talk about Arabic, right? For example, in the Arabic language, there are certain patterns that you have to follow, right? Like you say, okay, well, ismul fa'il is on the wazn of fa'il. You're going to say katib or darib or hamid or so forth, right? But then you might get something called sima. You might get a certain word that fits its own pattern, has its own pattern. It's an anomaly, right? You don't build a ruling off an anomaly. You don't do that in grammar. You don't do that in fiqh. You don't do that in fiqh. This is why he says, for example, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Abu Burda when he wanted to sacrifice a young she-goat, which is not what you normally do, an anak. He says it is sufficient for you, but it's not sufficient for everyone after you. Right? I mean, it's a ruling for you. It's an anomaly. You can do it. Doesn't mean everyone else can do it. Uh, Likewise, he married one of his companions to a young woman with what he had memorized of the Quran. Right? So his dowry was what he had memorized. So it wasn't a material gift. It wasn't a material wealth. Again, anomaly. You don't build a ruling off of that. Um, he wiped over his amama and wudu. Again, this is an anomaly. You don't build off of it, and so forth. Right? So when we're talking about building rulings of the Sharia and rulings regarding women, we take it from the Quran and the Sunnah and the Qiyas and the Ijma', right? We don't use rulings like, oh well there was this anomalous woman who dressed like this, or there was this anomalous woman who wore this. That's not evidence. That's not evidence. Um, so I think I'll stop there because what I want to go to next time is we're going to the first ruling, which is everything apart from one's face and hands and nakedness and awrah. We'll look at that next time, inshallah. But I think I've spoken for long enough. But we will talk more about this issue of evidences, where evidences come from. So I think from next time, inshallah, we will pick up from page 23. Okay, page 23. Yeah. طيب inshallah. Alhamdulillah. And I will hand over now for any questions and comments and feedback, inshallah.